This video is sponsored by Squarespace, the all-in-one website platform for entrepreneurs to stand out and succeed online. Rightio, I'm going to start this video by asking you to do something which sort of goes against my moral compass, I think it would class, because I'm not really someone who promotes this behaviour, usually. But for one time and one time only, I'd like you to imagine, for a moment, the worst person you can think of. Someone who you truly despise. Now, they can be anyone, a historical figure or a fictional one, or the worst person you've ever come across, or never met, in fact. This can be someone who's caused great harm either to you or to others, who's done despicable deeds or said horrific things. Someone which, quite frankly, if push came to shove, you wouldn't bring yourself to say a good word about them. Now, imagine you are enslaved to that person. You are at their beck and call every minute of every day for the rest of your life, from the moment you were born to the moment you die. You have to feed them, you have to take them to the toilet, you have to sit by them day in and day out, wash them, listen to them, talk to them, entertain them, do chores for them, blow their nose for them, clear their ears for them, tuck them into bed, drive them everywhere. You are completely enslaved by this person in a way that isn't actually physically possible. You can even hear their thoughts all the time. You can never leave their side. You are always, from the moment you wake up to the moment you fall asleep, at their side without a moment's peace, without detaching yourself from this person. And you can't physically escape. You can't escape their annoying voice or their irritating personality, even their breathing pattern. You know it off by heart and you hate it. You can't unsee them when you close their eyes. You feel them of every moment of every day. Well, for people who suffer from extreme self-hatred, what I described is one of the ways they feel about themselves. They spend every second of every day enslaved to the person that they hate more than anyone else in this world. They can't stand the sight of themselves, the sound of themselves, or even the thought of meeting their basic needs such as eating or drinking, because they are exhausted of feeling as though they are serving someone they rather didn't exist at all. Now, extreme self-hatred isn't the same as not liking oneself very much or having moments of going, "Oh, I hate myself," because everyone feels that way from time to time. However, if we are lucky, feelings of shame or even disgust about who and how we are in the world is enough to inspire change. We will give up eating certain foods or smoking or start exercising more regularly. We'll leave unhealthy relationships, study more, or start putting more of an effort into our appearances. However, for those with chronic self-hatred, there is no room for improvement. In fact, the feeling they are most suffocated by is one of agonising defeatism, as they have learned very on in life that everything they hate about themselves is entirely genetic and will always be that way. The way they think, act, look, sound, perform or function is inherently flawed, and they are trapped in this body and mind like a cursed entity who has made a pact with the devil, and nothing on this mortal coil can make them change. And even if they did change one thing about themselves, they are reminded about the years and potentially decades of their past in which they weren't that version of themselves, and the self-hatred continues to boil. As possibly one of the most self-hating philosophers, Émile Cioran, wrote, quote, "What do you do from morning to night? I endure myself." But before I go any further, I'd like to take a moment to thank today's sponsor, which is Squarespace. So whether you're just starting out or managing a growing brand, Squarespace makes it easy to create a beautiful website, engage with your audience and sell anything from products to content to time, all in one place and all on your terms. I've gone through many iterations online, from blogging about books to now running my own business, and Squarespace has seen all sides of my online evolution. I'm currently working on the first of writing shops backstage, and all of which I can host on my Squarespace website, which allows members-only content for my community, so I can sell access to online courses or blogs or videos or memberships, and purchases can be anything from a one-time fee to subscription access. And when it comes to evolving my business, I can make smarter business decisions with Squarespace's intuitive built-in analytics tools, which lets me review my website traffic or learn where to focus engagement or track revenue from bookings or invoices or product sales. I don't have to open a new tab or a different website, it's all in one place. So if you are interested, check out squarespace.com for a free trial, and then when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/lady of the library to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. With all the self-hating philosophers out there, there's actually quite a scarcity regarding the actual concept of self-hatred. There's a lot about suicide, but not really the concept of self-hatred. We have ideas of discussing the self in many parts, such as by Simon Critchley, who writes extensively about the self and how we can never really escape the inner voices that we have. But when it comes to really analysing self-hatred, you have to kind of dig below the surface of what philosophers are talking about, but a lot of them hate themselves, quite frankly. Now, one of the more casual, everyday philosophies that we toss around with is something I have a big issue with. It's the one that claims you can't love anyone until you love yourself first. Now, I do love Maya Angelou, but I sort of disagree with what she says here because, to me, that's somewhat of a fallacy. The exact quote from Maya Angelou is, quote, "I don't trust people who don't love themselves and tell me I love you. There is an African saying which is, be careful when a naked person offers you a shirt." And I get it. But when it comes to the idea of self-hatred and self-love, I sort of take this wary concept as quite a judgmental one. I mean, after all, let's go back to the proverb of a naked man offering you a shirt. Well, who's to say that the naked man had no motivation to get himself a shirt until he saw someone else without, and it was only seeing someone without that motivated him to go get one, because his motivation was in helping others rather than tending to himself. Or perhaps the naked man was once the man who gave the shirt off his back with someone else. In that act, he commits what many religions class as an incredibly saintly act, yet now he is shirtless and thus cannot be trusted. Okay, I take Proverbs too literally, but you get my drift. My main argument here is that a person who doesn't love themselves isn't incapable of love, just as they may love their father but not love their mother. Not loving their mother does not equate to being incapable of parental love, nor does it void the love that they have for their father. People who hate themselves aren't incapable of mustering up feelings of love. And to me, suggesting otherwise in a sentiment of do not trust those who hate themselves to love you rather demonises and dehumanises them in a way which doesn't help them in any way and arguably makes self-hating people feel more hopeless in life. Because otherwise people will consequently see their loving acts as fake or unfounded. Additionally, we can't apply this logic elsewhere with other emotions. You know, imagine meeting a person who says, "Ugh, I hate my colleague," and you reply, "Well, you don't hate yourself, so therefore I can't trust you to be capable of hating your colleague." It doesn't make sense. You can't apply meanings and rules to one emotion and then not apply them elsewhere. See, from my experience, people who hate themselves often do have things in life that they love very dearly, such as a beloved pet or a relative or a hobby, which then makes losing these things even more unbearable for them, for suddenly the vessel in which they poured all of their love is no more, and this is why self-hatred can leave people feeling incredibly vulnerable. They had a lot of love to give, but never felt as though they were deserving of any of it themselves. So when it has nowhere else to go, the self-hating person is often left feeling worthless and of no value to anyone anymore. Now, what's quite fascinating about self-hatred is that the person who self-hates very rarely hates others for the same afflictions. Now, I'm not saying there aren't exceptions. These are exemplified by those defined as the term a self-hating X, which implies the self-hating person sides with their oppressor's opinions and beliefs about themselves. Now, this is usually a form of self-preservation, which largely manifests in the self-hating person employing the same hateful language or ideas of their oppressors. Or they just go about their day completely despising those who exemplify or amplify core features often seen as characteristic of who they are. Yet, for the large majority of self-hating individuals, the only object of their contempt is themselves, and they do not see the traits they hate about themselves as negative aspects in other people. Largely, I would argue, they actually don't see their hated elements in other people at all. They only see themselves as stupid, or fat, or ugly, or short, or poor, or worthless, or talentless, or pathetic, or a loser. No one else, even if the people around them objectively meet the requirements suggesting otherwise, such as a classmate who failed an exam, or a friend who is significantly shorter than them in height. They would never dream of seeing their classmate as stupid, or their friend as unlovable because of their height, yet they see themselves that way. Now, I used a term earlier which may have gone slightly overlooked. I said the sentence, quote, "The feeling they are suffocated with most is one of agonising defeatism, as they have learned very early on in life that everything they hate about themselves is entirely genetic." Now, the key word here that I used is learned. No one is born hating themselves. Other people teach us what to hate about ourselves. Whilst the qualities people are hated for may be genetic, such as their race, gender, or sexuality, their internalised hatred for these aspects of themselves is learned from those around them. Even when we mature into adults who can criticise those who spewed such sadistic ideas, the hate we learned has become entrenched in us, so much so that it becomes as factual to our identity as our eye colour is, or our height or body hair. What's more, the younger we are when others taught us how to hate ourselves, the more we will associate such parts of ourselves as inherent, as we cannot imagine a time in our existence when we did not hate ourselves for them. So if you were to line photographs of yourself in front of you, one for every year of your life, starting from birth to today, and gazed upon them in order, you may be able to identify the age when you started hating yourself. Now, for the purposes of this video, I can give myself over as a case study for this discussion. It's not here to ask sympathy or ask for commentary on, but it is quite useful to dissect. For me, if the photographs were in front of me, the image where I hated myself first would be my 6-year-old self, for she was the first version of me who hurt herself for who she was. 6-year-old me did not want to exist, for the shame of who she was far too painful at that time. Now, despite her very short life at that time, she had endured daily mockery and was screamed at for being too thick, being told she had inherited being brain dead from her father's side, that she was ugly, too pale, too hairy, and greasy. All of her badness had been inherited from the father she never met, but she was told he was a lazy, overweight, depressed slob who accomplished nothing in life, and was a thick, nasty, selfish man who was so heartless that he didn't even acknowledge his own daughter. And unfortunately for that daughter, she was a spitting image of him, inside and out. Now, at school she also struggled. She had buck teeth and a rather peculiar face. She didn't talk very clearly, she had a cluttered speech, and everyone thought she was pretty weird. As she got older, she made stupid mistakes in class, which left her falling behind, and she really struggled to understand why she had to work so much harder than everyone else just to pass. Now, it was only thanks to a very observant chemistry teacher that she found out at 18 years old that she was incredibly short-sighted and had fallen behind her lessons her whole life, not because she was too dumb to read the board, but because she couldn't see the writing on it. Now, she had assumed her blurry vision was just how everyone in the world saw, but she had been too dumb to work out how to make her eyes work better or adjust to it to understand it better. Then, in her 30s, she learned that she was deaf in her right ear, and was most likely born that way, which also made sense why she'd struggled to hear people in classes and lectures, and had made so many blunders, such as giving obscene answers to questions, because she was too embarrassed to ask her teacher to repeat a question for a 3rd time out of fear of being seen too dumb to understand what was being said. She also learned in her 30s that she was severely dyslexic, as well as autistic and ADHD, all of which explained much more. Now, technically, all of these things she was born with, but the traits of which, left undiagnosed, had resulted in decades of hateful and cruel treatment from family, teachers, bosses, colleagues, and peers. The hate she had for these traits had been learned not as symptoms of diagnosable conditions, not just worthy, but in dire need of support and extra aid, but as inherent flaws in her personhood, which she had failed for years of her life to fix, overcome, or get better at managing. Yet, even with answers, the self-hatred embedded in me for 3 decades didn't go away, because a lifetime of other people's opinions mentally outweighs the facts, and even then, most people will dismiss these facts as excuses. As someone very kindly told me online recently when I discussed how my autism diagnosis had intersected with my past struggles in academia, they wrote, "I would say the vast majority of autistic people are actually geniuses. I've never heard of a single autistic person who struggled in academia. If anything, they thrived in academia. You're just looking for an excuse." Now, the irony of this comment was that I realised after reading it that this comment would have been the exact same sentiment my abuser would have used had I been diagnosed with autism as a child. You see, abusive and unkind people will always take the opportunity to ensure their victim is damned if they do and damned if they don't. It doesn't matter if you were a child or an adult, people will always take the opportunity to teach you how to hate yourself, particularly at moments when you are trying to like yourself. So if you were to break down the things you hate about yourself and look at them not as facts about who you are, but instead lessons taught to you by others, you may start to see a faulty education unfold before your eyes. People who do not take the time to educate themselves about potentially why you are the way you are and who you are and what you may need in life when you are young, vulnerable and in need of their mature guidance and wisdom, choose not to enlighten themselves for your benefit. Instead, they took lazy or arrogant approaches to educating you by sharing their ignorance and unwillingness to learn, and presented their sentiments as facts. Rather than engage in curiosity and taking the time to learn about you, they formulate conspiracies or theories about your existence and land on conclusions which most easily allowed for them to wash their hands of all responsibility, whilst posturing an air of authority and knowledge. You were just born that way. They can't help you with that, and so it was up to you to fix it and deal with it. You're on your own. You just drew the unlucky straws from the gene pool. When older and supposedly wiser and more knowledgeable people tell you how to hate yourself, you absorb it like a sponge. What's more, self-hatred continues to be learned throughout our lives. People online will also continue to be educators on reasons why you should hate yourself, or why you should hate X or Y person. Particularly online, we're always being told why we should hate ourselves and why we should hate others. Never why we should love and admire ourselves and others. The internalisation of hatred is often a distorted peace response. When we were younger and taught what to hate about ourselves, we didn't have the critical thinking skills or the safety to turn around and criticise the person being cruel, ignorant or unkind, as these people were often caregivers with much more power, authority and control over us. Out of fear of being punished or rejected for speaking back or defying them, we believed them. And even then, when we have the rationale as adults to identify someone not being nice to us, when someone was unkind, self-hating people will always think, well, I would never dream of saying such a thing to my worst enemy. So if they felt so comfortable saying that to me, it must mean that I am truly, really evil, ugly, stupid, etc. Now, this isn't to say that self-hating people cannot externalise their hatred. More often than not, the people who teach others how to hate themselves are also self-hating people, though I don't want to ascribe this behaviour as a byproduct of self-hate, although it is in many cases. Sometimes people are just unkind people and get a kick out of tearing others down, and the degree to which they dislike or like themselves is irrelevant to the degree of sadism they employ. The online world amplifies the messages we were taught when we were younger. We not only have our parents' and peers' reasons to hate ourselves, we have the whole world's. From you're too fat to you're too short, you're too wrinkled or you don't have enough followers, you're an incel or you're a catfish, you're faking your personality to you're not a clever autistic or you're not actually autistic enough. And all of this is your fault, and will tell you it's your fault. But there's nothing you can do about it to fix it, because if you come back different, you're a fake. Because we know it's in your genes. If you're different, then you're faking it, and that makes you inauthentic. So therefore you will die unhappy, ugly and alone, because your genes determine that. Could you imagine an internet in where all the comments promoted what they loved and admired, rather than bashed what they hated? I've always hated the term, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Words last a lifetime. And when the memory repeats in your head, you feel that punch in your gut as viscerally as you did the first day the punch landed, which makes it all the harder to recover from. Victims of self-hatred batter their brains black and blue with these memories. And what's worse is, on the other hand, the people who taught them to hate themselves are right. they can't change everything. They can't change the past. They can't change how others have perceived them. They can't stop being their sexuality or their race or their face or their gender or being disabled. The only thing the self-hating person can change about themselves is the story they attach to themselves. So imagine a boy who was quite spotty and overweight at school. He didn't attract any girls and was picked on by the other boys. They called him ugly and disgusting. From that, the boy makes a story for himself. He agrees with others, for starters, and he uses rejections from girls as proof that the other kids were right about him. From here, he begins weaving a story about how he is too short, poor, fat and ugly for love, and no one will ever love him. He also tells himself that all women are shallow and vain and only want handsome, tall, rich men, and he uses social media models and celebrities to prove his point. That story is set in stone, and he relays it over forums and other online spaces to others who have also told themselves the same story. However, that's just one story. There are millions of other stories that could be written by the boy for himself. That boy, who got called ugly and fat at school and never grew to be more than 5'2", decides to invest his energy into something else. I mean, he agrees. He's not tall. He's not conventionally attractive. I mean, goodness sake, he's not blind. And yeah, the girls laughed at him in the past. But he doesn't define himself by that. They were just nasty, a bit shallow girls. But they were teenagers. What else did he expect from them? Instead, he has dreams about being a really awesome rock climbing teacher or a scientist working on Alzheimer's, and he has hobbies like Dungeons and Dragons or DJing, all of which don't rely on him to be conventionally attractive or tall. They just need him to be passionate and good at what he does. And so, he does those things instead. He focuses on the things he can control and the things that bring him joy. He makes friends at work and joins clubs where he meets others and finds that the world offline is not as shallow as the world online had him believe, and the people in the communities he spends time with aren't as immature as the kids back in high school. The boy grows up and has the time of his life, enjoying it to its fullest because even if he is short, not conventionally attractive or wealthy, he has written himself into a story where his selfhood matters according to his terms, not other people's. Now, writing stories is actually really, really hard. Most people take the easy route. They just adopt the stories pre-written for them by other people, the ones that were told to them by their parents or schoolmates or social media, society or films and television. And the reason writing one's own story is so hard is because the dominant narrative has been carved into stone and repeated for so long that everyone regurgitates it and makes it so. We can't deny the barriers to entry established by dominant narratives in society. But we can choose to rebel against them, or not make them mean anything to us. Part of that is accepting that there are some realities that can never exist for us, because we're all human and we all have our limitations. But wasting our short lives on what we have for hating ourselves for not being able to subscribe to one or two storylines that either we or largely other people wrote for us is a grave mistake, dependent on a sincere lack of imagination, all of which I know humans do not lack. There are thousands of stories that we can write for ourselves, and if one becomes impossible, we just have to write another. And as we grow, we learn more and more about ourselves, not from other people, but from listening and learning through the experience of being with ourselves, the stories we write for ourselves, and become more authentic, less stained by fear of failure and rejection, less performative, less self-conscious, and more independent of external validation. There wasn't one particular book that I employed for today's video, so I didn't really quote many philosophers. This is just kind of a combination of me trying to read about self-hatred and coming up with my own ideas because I didn't really agree with a lot of things that were being said. I'm not a philosopher, so forgive me for saying a philosopher's guide to, because it is technically my guide to it, but it was inspired by me trying to read and actually not finding any answers in philosophy texts. So I hope you don't mind for the clickbait title, but I hope you found it useful. If you did, please consider giving it a like or subscribing or joining my Patreon. Thank you to my wonderful patrons, as always, for being magnificent. And thank you primarily also to my librarians. We have Eric Taylor, Cody Martin, Yvonne and Yvonne, Jenny Edvade, Marina, Psycho Teddy, Fritz Anderson, Wee Lauren and Andrea Bazil. And I hope you liked this video. If you did, please consider just telling me about it. You can always send me video requests in my Google Docs form down below, so if you have anything you particularly want me to cover, I'd love to do it. I will go back into more literature. I just had a little bit of play right now with topics that came more easily to me, just on the top of my head, because I was thinking about them quite a lot. Thank you all so much, and I hope you are happy and healthy, and remember, books save lives, so keep reading.